Hey CDA, and welcome back to this Dyson Sphere Masterclass. Today we're going to shore up our defenses because this is not going to cut it, and we're going to be making sure we get access to that juicy red science. On top of that, we're going to do a lot of prep work in order to get ready for the mid-game, so all in all there's plenty of stuff to do and to explore, and we're going to do all of that by staying nice and tidy, getting everything collected, and not making a spaghetti base. Before we get started, just a shout out to Rob Miller and Glenn H, who recently became members of the channel, so thank you guys for supporting the channel, it's much appreciated. Just as an aside, remember that you have this mall of different resources over here. We're not actually auto-producing most of the buildings, so whenever you do start to run out of something, let's say it's smelters, don't just queue up one or two of them, queue up a whole bunch of them, like 50 or 60. That way, the next time you start building something, you won't run out again, and that just saves yourself a lot of time and frustration. Now, also remember that we have the combustible units over here, and you want to be using those as your fuel. They're pretty efficient at doing so. Something else I want to note is that it's very useful to start researching drive engine if you haven't done so, because it makes getting around your buildings a lot easier because you can actually fly over them. Now, something else you might have noticed is that I switched these arc smelters from producing glass to producing the silicon ore. Now, you will have to research the technology in order to do that, which is over here somewhere. I always forget where it is. Here. Basically, whatever you need to unlock silicon will also unlock the silicon ore production. Now, this is really slow, but it's the only way to get silicon on your starting planet. We don't need that much glass, so you might want to make sure you limit this a little bit, even toss out a little bit of glass if that's needed, and start producing some silicon ore. In case you're wondering why we need that silicon ore, well, as you can see, my base actually got damaged quite a bit in the last few attacks. If you're playing at a lower difficulty, this probably won't happen to you. But basically, what I want to do is try to automate my defenses a little bit more. As you can see, everything is now damaged, and it won't repair itself unless I go near it, and then my drones will take care of that. Now, this is where the battlefield analysis base comes in, because this auto repairs your buildings. In order to build this, you'll need some silicon, so this is why we started to produce that, and specifically you will need some components, as you can see, microcrystalline components. Now, build a couple of those and place them in front of your defensive line. Now, the reason you place these in front is because these things can actually take a lot more damage than the turrets themselves, and that means they will kind of tank your damage and form a protective barrier before your turrets get destroyed. On top of that, by placing them next to each other, they will be able to repair each other as well. So it will take quite a bit of attacks in order for these things to actually be destroyed, and hopefully that actually never happens. To give you an idea of how effective this is, as you can see, we have a wave of about 70 units coming in. They start damaging my front line a little bit over here, but they don't even get close. This is because these waves are not that big yet. But as you can see, all my turrets get automatically repaired by the base, and I don't have to worry about this. I can just start building my factory. Also, very handy, these battlefield analysis bases will automatically capture whatever items the Dark Fog drops, so you will have things like microcrystalline components just available to you in these things, and you just can fly back here and pick up some of the more high-tech materials if you need them. Now, you can actually switch the drop filter as well. So you might want to, for example, turn off the logs and the plant field because we're not really using these anymore. Same goes for magnets. You can probably produce those yourself. And by disabling this, this will just prevent the base from clogging up with things you don't really need. You do not actually get additional resources from turning these off. So it's not like you're replacing the useless drops with something that's more useful. You're just auto-deleting basically these drops. So don't think you can just turn everything off and select one thing and then you will get huge amounts of those. That is not how this works. Okay, we're going to be expanding a lot during this episode, and I'm not going to repeat this every single time, but make sure you keep an eye on your power production. We're probably going to have to almost triple our power consumption, consumption as well as capacity. And if you don't keep an eye on this, your defenses will suffer from it, because of course if you drop down below 100% efficiency, that also means your defense is not working at 100% sufficiency either. So yeah, long story short, make sure you keep an eye on that. What we're going to do is we're going to produce some oil stuff, because we want, of course, the red science production up and running. And in order to do that, we're going to have to clear an area over here below this. Well, you can build it wherever you want, but I'm going to build it over here. simple reason is that we actually have some oil over here, so that makes it really convenient. Now, if you're going to fill in an area that has water in it, then you're going to need some foundations. Now, we have some foundations over here in production for exactly that reason. You're not producing a huge amount of these, and if you start just filling in all the things like this, then you're going to be consuming a lot of those foundations. So rather than doing that, just set it to the smallest amount, and then you can just click and skip a few spaces every time, and you can very easily fill this in. Now you will see this soil pile being consumed, and this is the really nice thing about destroying all those dark fog units, because they will actually give you soil pile in return. If you're playing on a lower difficulty level, you probably will have a smaller amount of that because you haven't killed as many units. So again, this is one of the benefits of playing on a higher difficulty. If you don't have enough of this, all you need to do is find these little hills in the landscape and just place down something. It can be either foundations, but you can actually just place down buildings as well. And as you can see, you get some soil pile from doing that. So anyway, just clear out a nice little square over here. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be building some oil production, and if you're building anything from this point onwards, make sure you have a battlefield analysis base, or maybe even two close by, because that will make it a lot faster to build whatever you need. Now, we're going to make a row of 6 oil refineries like that, and then we're going to flip this one around, press tab a few times, and make another line of 6 below. We're going to have an incoming belt with oil over here. This is going to be a hydrogen belt. And then on the outside, like this, we are going to have an outgoing belt with the actual refined oil. Now, as you can see, this goes a lot faster when you're building with a battlefield analysis base. Now, setting up the sorters like this is going to be a little bit tricky. So remember that we want the oil, the refined oil over here. So I'm going to make a sorter going from here to here. Then I'm not going to place it, but I'm actually going to press tab in order to press a filter on this. And I'm going to set this filter to refined oil, and I'm going to do the same thing in reverse from the other one over here. Now this means that the refined oil is only going to be able to come out through here. You can actually see the filter being set on the buildings themselves, and the hydrogen needs to come out in the back over here. So again, pressing a filter and doing it like that, and doing the same thing over here for this one. Now I'm going to do that for all of these buildings, but you only need to do it for these 4, because after that you can just copy them. And for every building that's in the same location relative in the duos that we have over here, you can just copy and paste them. Should probably have set the recipe before I did that, but remember you can also copy paste the recipes by using the lesser than and greater than signs, and that makes it really easy to set a recipe throughout your buildings. We're going to need to bring in some oil, and we have that down here. And again, make sure that you use a battlefield analysis base whenever you're building long stretches of belts, because that will save you so much time. You can just remove them whenever you're done with them. Let's see, we are also going to need some storage tanks in order to make sure we have a place for all of that oil and hydrogen to go. This can start producing, and then the next thing we want to do is set up a nice line of graphite production. Now we're going to make sure this aligns with the smelters we have over here. So I believe then we need to place them like this, and we're going to have 6 of those right here. I've connected some coal up to that as well, and I'm not going to show you where I'm getting every single one of my resources throughout the entire episode, but mainly because that doesn't really matter. You can just get it from wherever you want. But of course I'm prioritizing whatever is close or nearby. I'm trying to stay away from anything that is between me and the dark fog. So this oil is kind of unfortunately in between that. There's actually a lot of oil in between the dark fog and myself, so that is going to be a long-term problem. But for now, I don't have to worry about that. So just building along like I am. Something else I'm going to be doing is I'm placing down a lot of these splitters and boxes in between parts of my facilities, for the simple reason that I like having multiple places where I can draw these resources from in case I need them. You don't typically need that a lot, so this is a little bit of overkill on my side. I just got into the habit of doing that, so you can leave these out if you want. Now with this very simple build over here, we now have access to both hydrogen and graphite, and that's all we need to start making some red signs. So that is exactly what I've done over here. Now of course I aligned this production with the blue signs production that I already had, so it looks nice and tidy. And I actually removed the matrix labs that we had over here to do the actual research, and I placed that down over here again, nicely aligned with the ones we already had. So bringing down a belt like this, the reason I put the 1.5 here on the belt, at least that's what this is supposed to represent, is because we're producing 1.5 red signs per second. That's not a whole lot, but it's going to be quite sufficient, and they have a lot of research to do. So actually prioritizing where you go next in the tree is pretty important if you don't want to waste time. I recommend picking up the signal tower first, and then right after that we're going to make some turbines, so make sure you queue that up as well. Now, other than that, just to give you an idea where we are going to go next, you want a couple of things. So you want the crystal smelting, the one over here, because you actually need these crystals to make the signal, what are these called? Signal towers. And what else do we need? We are going to, well, you basically need everything at some point, but you might want to prioritize the titanium smelting, as well as the distribution logistics system, because we're going to be making use of that in the short term as well. After that, just focus on getting everything you need up into the logistics system. You're going to need to pick up a couple of other sciences, technologies to do that. We're also going to need, let's see, the second priority that you should focus on is what? The particle container, because you're actually going to need these in order to make the logistics systems like you can see over here. While you're waiting for the signal tower to be researched, you might as well make sure we get some missile production up and running. So I added in a assembly machine over here. We already had all the required items in order to do so. So we have the combustible units on the side here. We're bringing in the engines from below here. We were bringing in the circuit boards from over here, which is going to go on top of this belt over here, and then make a little quarter. And I added in a splitter over here to make sure that there's some copper going in as well. Now, of course, we're going to add in a box. This is one of the few boxes that you don't really need a limit on, so you might as well just have that. There's no such thing as having too many missiles. And we're not going to be using the missiles just yet, we'll do that later on. But of course, if you want, you can make a nice little turret array over here as already. But the missiles actually need the signal tower to be useful, at least that makes them a lot more easy to use. So let's focus on that first. In order to make the signal towers, you're actually going to need some of this crystal silicon, and in order to make that, you can't actually do that by yourself. So you're going to need a smelter to do that. So just place the one down, put a box in front of it to put in the silicon, and then just have an outgoing box to make this. This is a temporary facility. You only need maybe like a handful of signal towers. Actually, you technically only need one, but I recommend just making a few and then deleting this little setup. Then place these signal towers in front of your battlefield analysis bases, and the reason for that is that these things are actually even more sturdy than the battlefield analysis bases themselves. And what this will actually do is these will draw the enemy to these towers. So you are no longer in danger of expanding your facility and then suddenly having your enemies go around your defenses. No, they will always home in now on these towers, so you can build wherever you want as long as you are not putting any buildings in the direct line between the enemy and these towers. You should have no problem anymore defending yourself and making sure that these enemies are going to go exactly in the middle of your defense. Which is also why I put these towers not on the sides, but in the middle, because that will draw the enemy into the middle of my defense and into the maximum range of all these towers. Okay, enough about defense for a little while. They should be able to handle itself now, and we're going to be building on the right side of our base, because we have a nice open area over here, and of course I paved in a little bit of territory with the foundation method that I just showed you. What we want to start building now is some turbines. I have some battlefield analysis bases here to help me out with the building. And I want to be producing about 2 per second. Now, in order to calculate how many assemblers you need for that, just look at the recipe. Normally, it produces 1 turbine every 2 seconds, so that's 0.5 per second if you divide those two with each other. Now, keep in mind, again, I mentioned this in the previous episode as well, that the assembling machine actually produces at 75% speed. So you're not producing 0.5 turbines per second, you're actually producing 75% of that. Now, that means that if I have 6 of these assembling machines normally, that would produce 3, so 0.5 times 6 is 3 turbines per second, but multiply that with 0.75 and you will get a little bit more than 2 turbines per second. So I'm just going to round it to 2 here, but I am going to making sure that I actually keep that fraction in mind for the rest of this build. Now, if you want to make some nice looking layouts, all you need to do is work your way backwards from your original goal. So right now, for example, I know that I need 2 turbines per second. That's my goal. So I need twice as many motors per second, for example, because as you can see, there's a 2-to-1 ratio in the recipe. So that means I need to produce about 4 or 4.5 to be exact motors per second, and in order to do that, again, you just need to check the recipe and it's actually producing at the same speed, so you need exactly twice as many motor assemblers as you need turbines. So that means that I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 over here. And it's 11 because I'm actually aiming at exactly 2 turbines per second, so I actually only need 5 point something of these, and do that times 2 means I only need 11 of these rather than 6. So again, it's exactly going to be 2 turbines per second, so this is why the math doesn't exactly turn out, but you might be using a calculator to do this, or maybe a spreadsheet like I am. Doesn't really matter how you do it, just make sure you keep your ratios in mind so you don't overbuild or underbuild certain parts of your build. Let's see, what else do we need? We need some magnetic rings, we need some iron over here, and we need some gears in order to make all this. And the nice thing about the coils is that they're actually used for both the motors as well as the turbines, so this is why these are on a belt in between, so I can make sure I can use these for both. Now, it requires a little bit of planning to make your builds look nice, but for example over here, because I know, and I did the math on this, I need 4 assemblers making the gears, and the gears are actually also made from iron ingots, and we have the belt of iron ingots over here. I decided, well, why not place them down in this little corner over here, so we can keep everything nice and square. If you put them over here, there's nothing wrong with that, but you get a little bit less organized looking facility. And again, I'm just putting in some of these splitters and boxes just because I can. Editing TDA from the future here. There's a small mistake in this build that I didn't catch until later on. So what you should be doing is remove these boxes over here and move one of these turbine assemblers to the right. You can remove the one on the left. The number was okay, but the problem is that we're outputting the belts, the motors I mean, on this belt, and because this one is actually behind the last turbine assembler, this one will just be producing motors for the belt and not for the actual turbine. So that means we're losing some efficiency by having one of our assemblers doing nothing basically. So as long as you do that and then hook up everything to the belts, make sure that you're actually connecting the sorters, the outputting sorter on the belt over here and the inputting sorter somewhere, for example like over here. That way you can actually output it on the belt and still catch the production of the last assembler with the last turbine assembler, and you should be just fine. Okay, next up we need 12 of these smelters making the iron ingots, and this belt is going to go all the way around. It's going to fuel the assemblers making the motors, but it's also going to fuel the assemblers here making the gears. Similarly, we're adding in 12 smelters with magnets, 6 assemblers making magnetic coils, and then we need 4 of these smelters making the the copper ingots, and then we have everything ready to go. So the magnets are going to go here through the middle, and then the copper is going to go on top with the outputting belt. For the coils over here, it's going to go all the way down here, and then right through the middle over here, so both the turbines as well as the motors can draw from them. Then I've added all the sorters and the power poles to everything now, and as you can see, it's all humming nicely along, and we're producing 2 turbines per second. It's exactly 2 turbines per second, by the way. I made sure that all the incoming materials are tuned to that, so we should not be producing the 2.25 or whatever I said earlier on, just 2.0 flat. Now, I actually do recommend that you don't put in the power and the sorters until you actually have all the buildings where they need to go, for the simple reason that if you move anything, you'll be fiddling around with the sorters and the power way too much, so it's best to leave those to the end. Now, again, I have some resources coming up from the north over here. That's not a problem anymore, because remember, the signal towers are drawing in the enemy right through the middle, so I can pretty much build wherever I want. Now, there is a problem with this build, and I'm gonna let you type in the comments for a moment, pause if you need to spot what the problem is. Do you have it? Yes? If your answer was the belt speed is too low, the answer was correct. As you can see, we don't actually have the iron ore reaching the end of this belt over here, so these smelters are doing nothing. And that is because we need Mark II sorters in order for this build to actually function. So let's make sure we have some of those. In order to make Mark II belts, we need, you guessed it, turbines. And look what we are now making, turbines. On top of that, we actually need the same turbines for the Mark III sorters as well, so we might as well make those, and that's where this little gear, this little setup is coming in. We are going to draw in the Mark II sorters and the Mark I belts over here. Then we're going to add some of these turbines to that, and then we're outputting all of that into these two boxes over here. Now, in order to make sure the materials are actually reaching these various storage units, we are going to be making a couple of logic distributors along with some of these little drones to ferry stuff back and forth. Now, in order to make those, we're going to need some processors, some prisms and things like that. But all of that should be pretty easy to make from either what you have in your inventory, or you should probably have enough of those items in your battlefield analysis bases already. Now, just in case you don't know, you place these logic distributors like so. You place them on top of the box like this. Then you set the recipe to whatever you need to collect over here. So in this case, this is supposed to draw in the Mark I belts. You put it to request from other distributors, if that's actually what you're doing. And then you can put in a couple of these drones like so, and that should automate that, assuming you actually have somewhere supplying these things. So for example, over here I have another one of these distributors on top of a box. I set this to distribute now, and as you can see, -48, there's a couple of drones flying in to collect those. Similarly, we do the same here for the sorters, and I think I already did that for the... No, I didn't actually do that yet. So let's make sure we also do this for the turbines over here, like so. And you don't actually need to power the one that is being collected from, only the one that is sending the drones. So even though that one is unpowered, that doesn't actually matter. Now we're getting in all those resources, and as soon as the turbines arrive, we should start producing both the Mark III sorters as well as the Mark II belts. Another item we're going to need a lot of are processors, and we might as well start producing them because we can actually already produce them, even though we need silicon for that. Because remember, we can make our own silicon ore. Is it going to be fast? Not at all. But if we have a build plugging along for a couple of hours anyway, we might as well have it do so. Even though it's slow, it's still free resources. Well, not free resources, but it's resources we're going to use a lot of. So anyway, the point is we're going to make some processors, and we're starting out with a build of 12 smelters making silicon. Now I'm aiming for 1.5 processors per second, just because that turns out to be a nice number, because you need those 12 smelters for that, which is actually one full belt of input. So that's why it's tuned to 1.5, even though that seems like a random number. In order to make 1.5 processors per second, we're going to need 8 assemblers making microcrystalline components. So you can see this is a pretty expensive, pretty large recipe in terms of how big the factory is going to be to make all of that. Now, in order to make processors, we also need the circuit boards, so we only need actually 2 assemblers making that. So that means we're going to bring in not just copper, but also some iron ingots from somewhere, which is probably going to be down here. We have an exporting belt over here, and once again I'm using some of these boxes to kind of collect the overflow in case there is any. And actually that ingot production is all we need to add, so I have 3 of these smelters making iron ingots and 5 smelters making copper ingots, and then the copper ingots are going to go all the way across here and then onto this belt on the top. Again, there's just a box to collect the overflow, and similarly I have the iron ingots over here. Now you could argue to place this assembler over here, so it's more nicely aligned with the ones on the top, but let me demonstrate to you why that is a problem. I actually need to collect more of these iron ingots than I can actually reach, because this will only be able to reach the iron ingots from the belt over here, which is not enough to keep it fully functional, so that's why this second assembler, or the first assembler actually, needs to be over here, so the second one can collect the full output of these iron ingot belts as well as this one. It's just a tiny little thing, and it's kind of annoying, honestly, that we couldn't just scooch everything up one space to the left. You could solve that actually by just placing the smellers a little bit more to the left, but that wouldn't align anymore with this. So whatever your OCD fancies, just go with that. But this is what I decided upon doing. And there you go, you have it all powered up and sorted up. Is that a word? I don't know. Obviously, this is not yet going to be producing at 1.5 processors per second, but it's completely up and running and ready to do so once we get some access to more larger amounts of silicon. In order to make sure you have any silicon coming in, what you can do is, of course, use the logistics distributor once again to collect that from the little alternated facility we have over here. Now, if you ever run out of glass, just turn it back and have it produce glass for a little while. The glass is really easy and fast to produce. This is really, really slow, so you might as well prioritize this and only produce glass when you actually need it. Now, if you want, you can actually start building a very easy to use mall by using a similar setup as you can see over here, just with boxes pulling in different types of resources. You can put an assembler to make whatever building you want and then output it into another box. You can even put a logic distributor on top of that, and if you do that and you set the recipe to gas filter, which is going to be the one that's in it, what you can actually do is set your Icarus to request those items. For example, belts like this. You can say, I will always want to have at least 3,000 of these belts in my inventory. If you do that, assuming you actually have any bots in there, so let me get some bots from one of the others. I want these bots. Give me your bots. There we go. We're going to put the bots in here. And then as you can see, I will get the items delivered to my inventory completely automated. It's not going to go fast with just these two bots, but they will be flying back and forth as long as I am in the range to give me more and more belts. You can do that with every single building in the game. So if you want, you can have a fully automated mall up and running now. Now, I'm actually not going to do that yet, mostly because I don't think it's really necessary at this point. Still, don't worry, we'll get them all, just not now. But again, if you do want your mall, then this is a perfect moment to build it. We are actually producing almost everything you need in order to make the distributors as well. The only thing we're lacking is the plasma exciders. You could make a tiny little build for that as well, based on the examples that I just showed you. Shouldn't be too difficult to make a build to do so. I just don't think, again, it's really needed at this point, because you're not going to be using that many logistics distributors just yet. And it's pretty much the only thing where you need the plasma exciders for. So it's completely up to you whether or not you want to make that build. We actually do have all the items you need for the bots themselves, so you're going to use those in higher quantities if you're actually going to go and make that mall. So at least make sure that you start automating that one first. And that concludes this episode. We have the blue and red signs up and running now. We have some of the more advanced materials completely automated as well. We have a pretty nice looking defense that is actually self-repairing and self-sufficient for the most part. The only thing is that you need to watch out, especially if you're playing on a higher difficulty level, that you don't get overwhelmed. We're going to make sure we upgrade that a little bit in the next episode as well. And in the next episode, we're actually still going to be on this planet. Now, if you watched my previous playthrough, you actually saw me rushing to the second planet and starting to build a base there. Having tried that out for a couple of times now, I'm not entirely sure that's the most optimal way to play things. It's definitely a way you could go, so if you think that's interesting, make sure you watch my other playthrough. But the upside of staying on this planet for as long as we can, we actually take advantage of the fact that we have to research all the red and blue science stuff. And we actually are making a couple of builds, just like the ones over here, where we're actually preparing for the mid-game already. And that makes it super easy to scale up once we do actually get access to titanium and silicon. And there's a lot of prep work that we need to do in order to get all those ILS and vessel productions up and running that we will be focusing on, of course, pretty soon as well. Anyway, if you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.